and I just got my motorcycle license, and my husband at the time, let's call him Ed, because that is his real name. We were riding around town, and it was close to dinner time. He said, "Do you want to go down to the States for a buffet?" And I love buffets. So you can't really get them in Vancouver because of the whole, portion control and that kind of thing. So we head down to the border, and I don't even remember which crossing it was, but we're about 2 cars behind getting to the border guard in the booth there, and I realized I don't have any picture ID. And this is after 9/11, so they want picture ID typically, but I was thinking if I turn around now, it's going to look suspicious. And, I'll take my chances and give it a shot and see. And so we go up to the border guard, we take our helmets off, and Ed presents his license to the guard, and he looks at the license and looks at Ed, and he sort of, waves him through. You can go. And I take off my helmet, he looks at me, he looks at the yellow tissue paper that I've handed him, yellow tissue paper, and he points at this paper mache hut and says, "You have to go over there." So we put our helmets back on, we ride over to the paper mache hut, and we park our bikes, go in, and behind the counter there are these 4 enormous men in uniforms, and there's no one else in there, but they make us wait for about 10-15 minutes. And I'm starting to feel kind of angry about this. And finally the fellow right in front of me at the counter right in front of me says, "I can help you over here, ma'am." So I walk over and I produce this yellow tissue paper license, and he looks at it and he says, "What's your business in the States, ma'am?" And so I go into this rather long story about how, we were riding around town and we decided, we wanted to go for a buffet, and that we were going to go to the States. So he's listening kind of patiently, but you can see that he's like getting a little bit annoyed. And then he says, "So what do you do for a living, ma'am?" So at the time I was a student, so I say, "Well, I'm doing my master's in forestry, but actually the strange thing is I started teaching, and so I'm doing some teaching now, even though I tried to get out of teaching because my whole family is teachers, actually." So it's kind of weird how I ended up teaching, even though I was trying to avoid it. And so he started rolling his eyes without rolling his eyes, if you know what I mean. I can tell he just wants me to stop talking. And so he I think he thinks he's caught me in a lie. He's like, "So you're a teacher, but you're going down to the States for a buffet?" As though somehow those 2 things are totally inconsistent. And so I think, yes. And then, I'm realizing we go back and forth quite a bit, and he's asking me the same questions, but in different ways. And I'm getting frustrated, and he's getting frustrated. And then finally he says, he looks at my husband and says, "Is this your wife?" And I'm getting angrier because I'm thinking, why can he vouch for who I am, but I can't? And then I realized the problem here, and I say, I understand that you can't let me through if I don't have picture ID. That's okay. I don't need to go down to the States. He's like, "Oh, so you don't need to go for a buffet now?" And I think, of course I don't need to go for a buffet. So I'm starting to get angrier, and we're both at the end of our collective rope. And he finally says, what kind of ID do you have in your wallet? What do you have in your wallet? So I produced my Safeway card. Strangely didn't get me across the border. I produced my blood card, because you gotta have one of those when you're writing. And I do have a visa. So I pull that out, and I don't know what possessed me to say this, but as I slide it across the table, I said, "Why don't you buy yourself something pretty?" And later, Ed said he was pretty sure that was the point at which they were going to take me into a really small room and question me for 12 hours. But to his credit, the border guard looked at me, and he kind of laughed, and he said, "You enjoy your buffet, ma'am."
Fantastic. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen of the jury, once again, here we are.